Yo, what's up guys, welcome back to another video. This is a reaction to 2011, the year of EF5s. I do reactions to tornadoes. I find them very fascinating, whether it's more recent or stuff from the past where they're like the most well-known tornadoes in like US history, or just known to have caused a lot of damage, and or maybe they've not caused much damage, they've just happened in an area where luckily there's not been people in the line of it, but they're just spectacular looking things. And yeah, I mean, this is 2011, the year of EF5s. I think I have seen this mentioned before. I've not done a reaction based on this year of tornadoes because I mean, this is crazy. I mean, I don't think there was an EF5, or there has been an EF5 for quite a few years now. I think from what I remember, but I could be wrong. And then I remember that sort of fact being the case, and then this being mentioned about how there was 6 in this year alone, which is wild to think that. Again, I don't think there's been an EF5 for, I'm going to say 7 to 8 years. I could be wrong with that, maybe a bit less than that. But in this year alone, there was 6. Crazy. I mean, how that happens, it's just interesting how nature works, I guess. But we're going to check this out and see the year of the EF5. And I guess just jump into this video and check this out.
Rising to the top of the enhanced Fujita scale, EF5s are the most powerful classification a tornado can possibly get, and their destructive power is incredible. With estimated winds in excess of 200 miles per hour, EF5s are the most violent windstorms on planet Earth and are capable of leveling everything in their path, tossing cars hundreds of yards and carving deep scars into the ground. They are the kings of our skies and one of the most destructive forces on our planet. Since the implementation of the enhanced Fujita scale in 2007, there have been a total of 9 tornadoes that have officially reached this terrifying metric. Remarkably, 6 of them are from 1 year alone.
Crazy.
This is the story of one of the most violent years for tornadoes in modern history, 2011, the year of the EF5. The 2011 tornado season started off slow in the months of January and February before beginning to rapidly pick up in March and April, including a high-risk outbreak in the Deep South on April 15th, which produced several significant tornadoes. However, this was sadly only a sample of the destruction to come. As the month of April progressed, one of the most conducive environments for violent tornadoes ever documented was beginning to set up over a portion of the southeastern United States known as Dixie Alley, and as the end of the month approached, this setup would unleash one of the most devastating tornado outbreaks in recorded history. On April 27, 2011, the largest tornado outbreak ever recorded would strike the southeastern United States, producing hundreds of tornadoes, including 4 EF5s. The first of these would touch down near Philadelphia, Mississippi. The Philadelphia, Mississippi EF5 began just north of town and traveled northeast, slowly intensifying over the first few miles of its track before becoming violent as it paralleled US 21. The tornado reached EF5 strength for the first time here as it debarked trees, leveled homes, and threw vehicles hundreds of yards through the air. The forces inside the tornado became so intense here, it ripped the grass out of its roots and drilled into the earth, digging a trench in the ground 2 feet deep in some places. Remarkably, this was done while the tornado was moving at over 55 miles per hour and is some of the most intense ground scouring ever observed from a tornado to this day. The tornado would reach EF5 intensity a second time only a couple miles to the northeast, where it once again caused extreme ground scouring, leveled structures, and even ripped asphalt off the roads in some spots. Something that is only seen in the strongest tornadoes. The twister would slowly weaken over the next 14 miles before dissipating at 3 p.m. southwest of Macon, Mississippi. The Philadelphia EF5 thankfully tracked through a mostly rural area and, despite its ferocious strength, impacted few structures, resulting in only 3 fatalities. However, despite the rural track,
Oh my days, it is literally just completely turned the ground upside down, more or less.
the exceptionally intense ground scouring from this tornado would cement its legacy as one of the most intense tornadoes ever observed.
Imagine being hit by this. I mean, you can't imagine it because you would be done for. But look at this, it's completely leveled the ground. This looks like a site where they've been mining for things and stuff, and then it's just been left over time. And this has just been done within a few seconds, realistically.
80 miles to the northeast, another supercell would quickly develop, and as it crossed the Alabama border, produced one of the deadliest tornadoes in U.S. history. The tornado began at 3:05 p.m. west-southwest of Hamilton, Alabama, and traveled quickly to the northeast, slowly strengthening for the first 15 miles of its track. Minutes later, the tornado rapidly intensified, and as it approached the outskirts of Hackleburg, reached EF5 intensity for the first time.
Oh man.
As the tornado moved through Hackleburg, nearly every structure in its path was leveled. Trees would be uprooted and debarked, vehicles were thrown hundreds of yards through the air, and the grass was ripped out of the ground. Over 75% of Hackleburg would be destroyed, and 18 lives would be lost before the storm.
So this town, I mean, it's just gone. A town's like whole history is just gone like that. 75% of the town's just been destroyed. How do you come back from that? That, like, obviously, like, the lives are the things that I'm thinking about most, because obviously, everyone's gonna know someone here who would have been killed, right? Someone close to them. Probably everyone's got some sort of friend or family that's lost their life in this specific moment. But then with that, they've also lost their homes. They've lost everything. How do you come back from this? I just find it so fascinating how the US can go through all these weather events, whether it's tornadoes or, I say, earthquakes. I know earthquakes do happen; they're not as common, but earthquakes, storms. There's one that I just can't think of out of nowhere. You've got tornadoes. I guess it is mainly floods. I guess floods in like places like Louisiana and stuff. There's just so many different weather circumstances in the US. How the US can constantly come back from this stuff is, I mean, from what I assume, come back. Maybe in reality it isn't like that at all, and the people that are affected truly don't get the help they need. I don't fully know how it works, but like, how do you rebuild a town like this that's just been fully taken away?
Storm left the devastated town. Several miles to the northeast, the tornado reached EF5 intensity for a second time as it impacted the small town of Phil Campbell. Here, numerous well-constructed homes would be completely swept away, and a 25-foot section of pavement would be scoured off a road and thrown over a quarter-mile away. In one spot, the winds became so intense they ripped the roof off of an underground storm shelter and scoured the ground nearby. A total of 27 people would lose their lives in Phil Campbell before the tornado finally moved on. Farther to the northeast, the tornado reached its maximum intensity as it impacted the small town of Oak Grove, where it obliterated and completely swept away an exceptionally well-constructed brick home and left a continuous swath of EF5 damage for the next 8 miles, removing anything that stood in its path. The tornado remained violent, producing high-end EF4 damage as it became increasingly rain-wrapped, shrouding the monster hidden within.
How big that is.
The tornado would continue for another 86 miles, devastating numerous communities in its wake before finally dissipating at 5:40 p.m.
Oh man.
The Phil Campbell Hackleburg EF5 would cause more than $1 billion in damage and claim the lives of 72 people, making it the deadliest tornado in Alabama state history and the true demon of the 2011 super outbreak. The tornado's ability to produce exceptionally long swaths of EF5 damage over a large portion of its track indicate this tornado was likely among the most intense in modern history.
Flipping
Following closely behind the Phil Campbell Hackleburg tornado, another long-track supercell rapidly strengthened and at 3:42 p.m. produced one of the strongest tornadoes of all time. The tornado began 2 miles north of Amory, Mississippi, immediately becoming violent only moments after touching down. Numerous trees and rural structures were leveled to the ground as the monster tornado began to rapidly strengthen and grow. Further strengthening occurred as the tornado reached EF5 intensity, drilling a trench into the earth as the ferocious winds began to enter the small town of Smithville, Mississippi. As the tornado entered town, nearly every single structure the tornado impacted was obliterated with the slab swept clean and the debris scattered long distances. Vehicles were thrown hundreds of yards, trees were debarked, and the ground was scoured to a depth of 1 foot. Home after home was removed from its foundation here, with the debris finally granulated into small pieces. An SUV here was picked up and thrown a half-mile into the Smithville Water Tower, bounced off, and flew another quarter-mile before crashing back into the ground as an unrecognizable ball of metal. Pavement was scoured from the roads, and as the tornado exited town...
Yeah, this image is mad. This is absolutely mental. You can see the path all the way into the distance, and it's just completely ripped everything in its path to shreds.
It obliterated a funeral home, sweeping its foundation clean of debris and shearing off many gravestones.
Oh, man.
The Smithville EF5 would ultimately claim the lives of 23 people and caused over $14 million in damage. The tornado's ability to completely sweep away well-built structures, throw vehicles thousands of yards, dig trenches in the soil, and cause severe debris granulation, all while moving at a high rate of speed, caused many to suspect that the Smithville EF5 is possibly the strongest tornado in modern history. 100 miles to the east, the same supercell thunderstorm responsible for the Philadelphia tornado would produce the day's final EF5 near the town of Lakeview, Alabama. The tornado would slowly intensify over the first 7 miles of its track, morphing through various shapes and sizes as the subvortices danced within the parent tornado, displaying the iconic dead man walking, something only observed in the strongest tornadoes.
Oh man.
As the tornado approached the eastern side of Rainsville, it rapidly strengthened and reached EF5 intensity as it caused significant ground scouring and wiped numerous trees and businesses off their foundations, some of which were well constructed. Vehicles here were thrown hundreds of yards through the air, trees nearby were debarked, and pavement was scoured from the roads. After leaving Rainsville, the tornado would slowly weaken over the next 20 miles before dissipating at 6:55 p.m. near the community of Rising Fawn, taking 24 more lives with it and causing over $10 million in damage. By the time the day was over, 216 tornadoes, including 4 EF5s, had decimated numerous communities.
216, mate. So you're stuck in this region. You are like just, I guess, waiting this day out, or waiting these few days out, because I assume days around it was also producing stuff like this. And you're stuck. You can't really go anywhere, because you go somewhere else, you've got the potential to be hit by another tornado. Like, it's just a waiting game. This is the most, like, I feel like a film could be made about this sort of. I mean, I know there's a film called Twister. I'm going to do a reaction to that very soon on my Patreon. It's coming. I think it's called Twister. It's like basically a classic film on tornadoes. This, like, a tornado outbreak film, which could be what Twister really is, but I feel like Twister's more focused on just one hugely devastating tornado. But this one, it's just tornado after tornado. Just the outbreak is ridiculous.
Communities across Mississippi and Alabama, leaving unimaginable devastation in their wake and sadly claiming the lives of 316 people. The 2011 super outbreak would leave its mark as the largest tornado outbreak in recorded history and leave scars in the landscape that are still visible to this day.
Wow. Oh my days.
Following the super outbreak, a relatively quiet period of severe weather developed with very few tornadoes reported. However, that was all about to change. On May 22nd, a potent severe weather setup began to take shape over the Central Plains, with a multi-day outbreak of tornadoes likely to develop. By 5:17 p.m., a large complex of thunderstorms had morphed into an organized rotating supercell on the outskirts of the city of Joplin, Missouri, and at 5:34 p.m. produced its first tornado. The tornado began to rapidly expand as it entered the southwestern edge of Joplin, becoming heavily wrapped in rain. Within only minutes of touching down, the now monster multiple vortex tornado had become violent, heavily damaging or sweeping away numerous structures in its path. However, what followed would be nothing short of apocalyptic. The now invisible mile-wide wedge tornado strengthened to EF5 status and entered into the heart of Joplin, obliterating everything in its path. Nothing was spared from the violence of the winds. Hundreds of vehicles were lifted into the air and thrown hundreds of yards like toys. Anchored concrete parking stops weighing more than 300 pounds were tossed 60 yards away. Steel manhole covers were sucked off the roads, and a hospital became so heavily damaged it later had to be torn down. Thousands of homes, businesses, and institutional buildings began to disintegrate in the face of the now 200+ mile per hour wind.
I've reacted to Joplin a couple times now, so I am fully up to date with it, but I don't think I've seen these images. This is absolutely ridiculous.
The hospital became so heavily damaged it later had to be torn down. Thousands of homes, businesses, and institutional
everything, literally everything here is just gone, or just ripped to shreds. That is mental. And this is a very this is like a very populated town. Like, it doesn't, it's not one of those towns where it's just like a few houses dotted around. This is this looks like a pretty functioning town where there's, I guess I say town, maybe it's a small city or something. It looks big. And there's houses or there's businesses on every single corner.
Buildings began to disintegrate in the face of the now 200+ mile per hour winds. Neighborhood after neighborhood was swept away, and a bank was obliterated with only the steel reinforced concrete vault still standing.
Flip it out.
The air filled
That
with
is
debris,
ridiculous.
forming deadly missiles as EF5 damage continued, stripping trees of all bark, scouring asphalt from the parking lots, and leveling large shopping centers and steel reinforced warehouses completely to the ground. By the time the tornado had left Joplin, A city had been devastated and 158 people had tragically lost their lives, with thousands of others severely injured. The total damages from the tornado reached an unbelievable $3.64 billion, making Joplin the costliest tornado in recorded history and one of the worst natural disasters to ever strike the United States. 2 days later, the same potent weather system that had produced the Joplin tornado was bringing the same deadly ingredients together for an even more violent and widespread severe weather outbreak, this time taking aim at central Oklahoma. By 2 p.m., a line of supercell thunderstorms exploded along the dry line and began to track northeast towards the Oklahoma City metro. One of these storms began to dominate the atmosphere and at 3:51 p.m. produced one of the strongest tornadoes ever documented. The tornado began in a field 18 miles to the east of the town of El Reno, Oklahoma, rapidly strengthening as it moved to the east-northeast. Within only moments, the twister had taken on the appearance of a wedge and began to explosively intensify to EF5 status. As the tornado neared Interstate 40, a mobile Doppler radar truck positioned nearby began scanning the tornado and recorded an unbelievable wind speed within the vortex of 295 miles per hour, the second highest wind speed ever recorded on Earth. Numerous cars were impacted and their occupants hurled into the air and thrown hundreds of yards as the tornado crossed Interstate 40, reaching its peak strength. Here, the tornado would strike an oil drilling site and produce some of the most unbelievable tornado damage ever seen. The oil rig weighed over 2 million pounds and was anchored into the ground and to the borehole, providing an additional 200,000 pounds of downforce. Despite this tremendous weight and stability, the ferocious winds of the tornado completely destroyed the rig, blowing it over and causing it to roll several times and bending the rig's large steel blowout preventer.
Jesus.
Miraculously, a large steel container tied down with steel cables housing 12 workers working on site would be the only structure to survive the unbelievably intense winds. The tornado would remain violent for the next 26 miles as it devastated several rural communities between El Reno and Piedmont, Oklahoma, completely sweeping away dozens of homes and debarking many trees before gradually weakening, with the final EF5 of 2011 dissipating at 5:35 p.m. near the town of Guthrie, Oklahoma, taking 9 more lives with it and cementing itself as one of the most powerful tornadoes ever recorded. By May 25, 2011, a total of 6 EF5 tornadoes had completely obliterated numerous communities and taken the lives of 290 people, resulting in over $5 billion in damage. In the span of less than 1 month from April 27th to May 24th, 2011, 2/3 of all the EF5s in history had occurred, along with 14 EF4s and over 500 other tornadoes across a region spanning the entire United States east of the Rocky Mountains. To have such an extreme concentration of all the EF5s in 1 year seems to defy all reason. However, it is very likely that this remarkable concentration of EF5 tornadoes is even more extreme than we realize. Many of the other high-end tornadoes that occurred during the outbreaks on April 27th and May 24th, 2011 were in the same extremely favorable atmospheres that the 6 EF5s occurred in, and it is quite likely that many of these tornadoes were of similar strengths, and ultimately, whether or not they received an EF4 or an EF5 rating came down to the surveyors and what these tornadoes happened to hit. As unbelievable as it sounds, that single month in 2011 likely contained dozens of tornadoes capable of inflicting EF5 damage. By the end of 2011, 1,706 tornadoes had occurred within the United States, including over 277 significant tornadoes of EF2 strength or greater. This places 2011 as the second most active year on record, and with a total of over $26 billion in damage done and 553 fatalities, easily makes it the costliest year for tornadoes ever recorded, and also one of the deadliest. The true scale of the tornadoes from this single year is something we will never be able to fully understand, and should stand as a constant reminder of the incredible power of the atmosphere around us.
God damn, man. How this can happen like this is so fascinating. How, like, obviously tornadoes happen. There's tornado season, right? Like they happen no matter what. But how it can just go from, like, every so often, every year, there's maybe occasional outbreaks to outbreaks beyond comprehension like this. It's just crazy how that can even happen. Obviously, the conditions were so perfect for this to take place, but Flipping hell, man. Must have been a scary time to be living in these regions when you're just knowing, yeah, there's just another one coming. It's like, it's just endless, non-stop. 2011 was an overall awful year weather-wise. The massive quake and tsunami in Japan, a rare quake in the east, Hurricane Irene in the same region, and these tornadoes. Yeah, flipping hell, man. You do not catch a break in these regions, you really don't. But this was a look into the 2011 year of the EF5s. And I mean, yeah, it was brutal. But let me know your thoughts and if you remember living through this or the news coverage around this and how it truly was, because nothing can really compare to actually experiencing this, I guess. So, I mean, yeah, let me know your thoughts on this. But yeah, until next time, like, subscribe, and peace.